Phew, this situation didn't unravel quietly at all. Desmond Scott didn't just end his marriage, he detonated it in full view. Word on the street is that his affair didn't just result in a pregnancy, but twins. And suddenly, Kristy's decision to file for divorce, specifically citing infidelity, feels a lot less surprising. How does a relationship that began with teenage love and blossomed into influencer, couple goals spiral into hidden pregnancies, outside children, and a marriage collapsing under betrayal? That kind of fallout doesn't come from a momentary mistake. And if insiders are to be believed, this wasn't accidental at all, it may have been intentional from the start. As more details surface, it's becoming clear that the twins weren't just a scandal, they were the reveal that exposed everything. And once you hear how deliberate Desmond's actions were, this divorce starts to look far more calculated than messy. Honestly, it's the audacity for me. Imagine discovering your husband didn't just cheat, but brought 2 babies into the world with someone else. At that point, packing up and leaving isn't dramatic, it's survival. What makes this whole situation hit harder is that Desmond and Kristy were never seen as fragile. They were the couple people believed in. Their relationship existed long before brand deals, curated feeds, and influencer fame. That history made their bond feel genuine, rooted, real. So how did it all collapse into secrecy, betrayal, and twins with another woman? According to someone close to the situation, Desmond had grown exhausted with the influencer lifestyle and craved something simpler, something that felt normal. But wanting an ordinary relationship is complicated when your entire income and identity are built online. The insider claims that stepping outside the marriage wasn't just about attraction, it was about escape. The other woman allegedly represented calm, quiet, and a sense of peace he no longer felt at home. And to make matters worse, whispers are now circulating that this wasn't even his first betrayal, just the one that finally brought everything into the light. Behind the scenes, people close to them claim this wasn't exactly shocking. Allegedly, it had been an unspoken truth in their social circles that Desmond had been quietly entertaining other women for a while. Kristy was aware, too, but she chose to look the other way. At least, she did until things crossed a line he couldn't clean up. The moment another woman became pregnant, the situation shifted from tolerable to unforgivable. That was the breaking point. Kristy reportedly decided she would not remain in a marriage where she was expected to coexist with betrayal, let alone play a stepmother role to children conceived outside of it. That's when she filed for divorce. Legal documents later revealed that she explicitly named infidelity as the cause of the marriage's collapse and made it clear there was no possibility of reconciliation. As chaotic as the situation appeared publicly, some longtime observers weren't surprised at all. Many social media users said cheating was the only explanation that ever made sense for a split like this. One post that circulated widely added another layer of context, explaining that within Jehovah's Witness beliefs, divorce is only religiously permitted in cases of infidelity. According to that user, some members intentionally engage in affairs to create grounds for an approved divorce. And that's where the story takes a much darker turn. An anonymous source now claims that Desmond didn't accidentally get the other woman pregnant, that it was a calculated move. Allegedly, he believed this was the only way to force Kristy into ending the marriage, knowing she would never agree to a divorce otherwise. As extreme as that sounds, some people believe his own words subtly support that theory. In his public statement, Desmond admitted that he wanted to separate toward the end of 2025 and had discussed it with Kristy. He acknowledged making choices he wasn't proud of, taking responsibility, and ultimately agreeing to divorce, asking for privacy and grace along the way. On the surface, the statement reads polished and emotionally controlled. But many feel that behind the calm wording lies years of frustration, unresolved conflict, and quiet resentment finally boiling over. Insiders suggest Desmond fully understood what introducing an outside child would mean. He knew it would permanently shatter the marriage. Emotionally speaking, this wasn't an accident, it was a point of no return. And that realization is what has people questioning his true intent. Was this about wanting a child with someone else, or was it the one irreversible action that guaranteed his exit? Now that reports say the other woman is expecting twins, the situation feels even more deliberate. Twins don't just complicate emotions, they lock everyone into a lifelong reality. There's no discrete ending, no way to minimize the impact. This is permanent, demanding time, money, presence, and responsibility for decades to come. When fans consider the secrecy, the timing, and the emotional distance that had been visible for years, many conclude this wasn't driven by love or impulse, but by escape. A door he couldn't open through conversation, so he kicked it down instead. At this stage, it's hard to see a version of this story where anyone truly wins. There's no clean closure, no neat resolution. The deepest sympathy from fans is reserved for the babies, who are completely innocent in all of this. Before they're even born, they've been pulled into a storm of adult decisions, public judgment, and online speculation. Some people see them as evidence of betrayal, others as leverage, others as consequences, but they are none of those things. They are two lives who will one day grow up and discover their beginnings were debated, analyzed, and reduced to commentary on the internet. And that may be the most unsettling part of this entire situation. At the same time, there's a growing group of fans who see the situation very differently. They don't believe Desmond acted out of spite or cruelty. Instead, they think his choices came from emotional exhaustion and quiet panic. In their eyes, he had already checked out of the marriage long before the paperwork was filed. He wasn't plotting harm, he was trapped, overwhelmed, and desperate to escape a life that no longer felt like it belonged to him. After all, their story didn't begin as adults with careers and cameras. They were kids when they fell in love. Growing up side by side creates a bond that's intense and deeply rooted, but it can also become confining. When you meet someone that young, your identities grow together. Your sense of self blends into theirs. So leaving doesn't just feel like ending a relationship, it feels like deleting an entire version of who you are and who you've always been. Back then, there were no followers, no engagement metrics, no audience dissecting every interaction. They were just two young people navigating life together. But as time passed and their relationship became content, everything changed. Love turned into a product. Privacy disappeared. And long before any official announcement, fans started sensing something was off. Desmond appeared detached, almost hollow. His presence felt heavy. His smiles looked practiced, not felt. It was as if he was showing up physically while emotionally living somewhere else entirely. When a relationship becomes part of a brand, honesty becomes risky. Arguments can't be raw. Emotions can't be messy. Every crack has to be concealed for the sake of appearances. Over time, that constant performance erodes people from the inside out. Some fans believe Desmond stayed far longer than he should have because leaving would mean dismantling everything they'd built, not just a marriage, but an image, a shared income, and a story millions of people believed in. A quiet exit was never realistic. The only way out was explosive. Adding to the complexity, there are also fans who criticize Kristy, accusing her of centering the relationship around herself. That claim is uncomfortable and layered. On one hand, she was the one betrayed, both privately and in the public eye. Her pain is valid. Her anger makes sense. On the other hand, critics argue that over time, the relationship began to orbit her needs, her emotions, her perspective. They suggest Desmond became more of a supporting character than an equal partner. Whether that's fair or not, it's clear the dynamic had become unbalanced in ways that were never fully addressed. When couples stay together from such a young age, growth doesn't always happen in sync. One person evolves faster. The other changes in a different direction. Sometimes one grows while the other stays still. Instead of confronting that reality, many couples cling to shared history. They try to force compatibility out of nostalgia, holding on to who they used to be rather than accepting who they've become. That denial doesn't heal anything, it breeds resentment. And resentment has a way of leaking out through silence, distance, and eventually, destructive behavior. What makes this situation truly tragic isn't just the affair or the divorce. It's the years of unspoken tension that likely came before it. The conversations that were postponed. The feelings that were swallowed. The moments where one or both of them probably felt deeply alone while sitting inches apart. By the time everything blew up, the marriage may have already been emotionally over for a long time. The outside pregnancy didn't end the relationship, it revealed that it had already ended. But revelation doesn't lessen the damage. Kristy now has to mourn not just the marriage, but the future she believed in, the plans, the shared language, the life that once felt certain. Desmond has to live with the reality that his choices didn't just close one chapter, they permanently altered multiple lives. And the children, someday, will grow up carrying a story shaped by secrecy and controversy before they ever had a say in it. Fans will continue debating motives. Was it fear? Selfishness? Burnout? Strategy? Recklessness? The truth is rarely simple. Human behavior almost never comes from a single, clean intention, especially when identity, pressure, love, and unhappiness collide. What is clear is that this situation is a cautionary tale about what happens when people ignore their discontent for too long. When staying feels easier than leaving, until leaving becomes unavoidable, no matter how devastating the fallout. Asking for privacy and compassion sounds reasonable, but it's complicated when your life has been shared so openly for so long. Audiences feel entitled to answers because they've been invited into the story for years. Yet no explanation will ever satisfy everyone. Some will always cast Desmond as the villain. Others will see a man who finally broke under the weight of expectations. Some will scrutinize Kristy endlessly, while others will defend her without hesitation. What can't be denied is that this story goes deeper than gossip. It's about unresolved pain and the cost of avoiding hard truths. It's about what happens when real relationships become performances, and emotional honesty is postponed until it erupts. And most painfully, it's about how innocent lives can become collateral damage in adult decisions that were years in the making, long before anyone was brave enough to confront what was already broken. At first, it was easy to dismiss the warning signs. Kristy's over-the-top pranks, often designed to push Desmond's buttons, were framed as playful chaos, the kind couples exaggerate when their lives double as entertainment. In the early days, most viewers laughed it off as harmless teasing, especially in a space where shock value often equals engagement. But for anyone really paying attention, the energy slowly shifted. What once felt lighthearted began to feel sharp. The jokes lingered a little too long. The punchlines landed a little too hard. Fans started noticing that Desmond's reactions didn't quite match the moment. His smiles looked practiced. His laughter felt delayed, restrained, like someone trying to keep it together under a spotlight. When Kristy crossed certain boundaries, embarrassing him publicly, brushing off his discomfort, or turning private moments into jokes, it stopped feeling like content and started feeling like unresolved tension wearing a costume. The humor became a mask, and the cracks underneath it were getting harder to ignore. Those cracks were especially visible in moments that should have been soft. When Desmond cooked for her, thoughtfully plating meals, clearly trying to show care, her responses often felt dismissive. Instead of appreciation, there were sarcastic comments. Instead of warmth, eye rolls and jokes at his expense. These weren't grand gestures or dramatic scenes, just small, human acts of love. And watching them be minimized made something painfully clear to viewers: the balance was off. The comment sections reflected that shift. People weren't just entertained anymore, they were uneasy. So when whispers began circulating that Desmond wanted out, it didn't feel out of nowhere. Looking back, the clues had been scattered everywhere. The stiff interactions. The awkward pauses. The way they moved around each other more like coworkers than partners. It felt like the joy had drained long before the announcement, and leaving may have seemed like the only way to breathe again. But walking away from their relationship was never going to be simple. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a brand, a business, a lifestyle that sustained their income and public relevance. That's where things get even murkier. Sources suggest the situation wasn't driven purely by love or heartbreak. Together, they were profitable. Their couple content was the backbone of their success. Followers weren't just attached to them individually, they were invested in the idea of them, the home, the family routines, the illusion of stability. A split didn't just threaten emotions, it threatened the machine that paid the bills. And for a long time, it appeared Kristy wasn't willing to let that image collapse. Then came the twins. 2 babies arriving at once, shattering any remaining illusion that this could be smoothed over or ignored. Twins aren't subtle. They're permanent, undeniable, and impossible to spin quietly. Whatever bargaining or denial Kristy may have been holding on to had nowhere left to hide. At that point, letting go wasn't about pride or appearances, it was about reality. There was no version of the story where pretending everything was fine still worked. What surprised people even more was how little resistance Desmond seemed to show afterward. From the outside, it doesn't appear that he's fighting the divorce at all. He's reportedly allowing Kristy to keep their new home, a choice that immediately raised eyebrows. A house isn't just property. It represents safety, continuity, and the future they were supposed to share. Stepping away from it felt like more than generosity. It felt like acceptance. Maybe guilt. Maybe surrender. Either way, it spoke louder than words. Kristy didn't deliver a long explanation or dramatic tell-all. Instead, she did something far more calculated and effective. She posted photos of herself standing confidently in the house and captioned them with just 2 words: same address. Simple. Quiet. But unmistakably clear. She was staying. This was still her home. She wasn't being erased or pushed aside. And then, in a moment that sent the internet spiraling, Desmond liked the post. One click sparked endless speculation. Was it support? Regret? Passive aggression? No one could agree, but everyone noticed. And just like that, the full weight of the situation settled in. Desmond is now on track to be a father of 4 within a single year. 4 children. 2 households. A public image forever altered. People can't help but question what kind of father he'll be to these new babies. With Kristy, he's always appeared present and involved, playing with the kids, helping out, showing up consistently. That's part of why this situation feels so jarring. How does someone who seems like a devoted parent make choices that fracture his family so completely? That contradiction is what leaves people unsettled. Not just the betrayal, but the disconnect between who he appeared to be and the consequences of what he's done. Given everything surrounding the arrival of these twins, it's not surprising that people are uneasy. Being an involved parent in one home doesn't magically mean you can split yourself evenly between two families. Time isn't elastic. Emotional presence isn't limitless. And when one household is born out of betrayal, it naturally raises difficult questions about the stability of the other. Will these babies ever feel fully claimed, fully secure? Or will they grow up sensing that they entered the world under complicated, uncomfortable circumstances? No one has answers yet, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes people nervous. And that's really where this whole situation lands, not with resolution, not with clarity, but with discomfort. There's no satisfying conclusion here. No clean moral lesson. No perfectly defined villain or heroic redemption. Just flawed people dealing with the fallout of deeply personal choices while the entire world watches. It's messy, unresolved, and painfully human. If even half of the rumors are accurate, then this wasn't a matter of a mistake followed by regret. It looks more like Desmond completely imploded his own life in a way that couldn't be undone. Outside children, twins, no less, created a permanent rupture. Some betrayals leave room for repair through honesty, therapy, and time. This wasn't one of those situations. This crossed a threshold where going back simply wasn't possible. At the same time, Kristy clearly reached her breaking point. And instead of shrinking herself, instead of tolerating the unbearable just to protect an image or preserve income, she chose herself. She drew a line. She walked away from a relationship that no longer offered respect, safety, or alignment with the future she envisioned. That choice doesn't erase the pain or the grief, but it does show a refusal to trade dignity for appearances. When you strip away the gossip and speculation, this story is bigger than infidelity or divorce headlines. It's about what happens when private decisions collide with public lives. It's about the consequences of turning real relationships into performances. And it's about the uncomfortable reality that no matter how long you've been together or how much you've built, a single decision can permanently alter everything. Now Desmond is on the brink of becoming a father to 4 children. The twins haven't even arrived yet, and people are already questioning how this will unfold over time. Because regardless of where anyone stands emotionally, the children are innocent. They didn't choose chaos. They didn't choose controversy. So the questions linger: was this desperation? Calculation? Or years of suppressed resentment finally erupting? Whatever the answer is, this story doesn't feel finished. Not even close. Something about it suggests there are still layers we haven't seen, and truths that haven't surfaced yet.